comes Debbie Roden. She's going to be driving hot stuff tonight as the U.S. Hot Rod Association presents the Battle of the Monster Trucks and Mud Bog Spectacular. I'm Shelley Herman, along with my pal Brett Kepner. We're going to be giving you all the play-by-play action. And here to tell you more about it is my buddy, Brett Kepner. Brett?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena. I'm Brett Kepner, and along with Shelley Herman, we're ready for what is traditionally one of the toughest battles on the U.S. Hot Rod Association National Event Mud Racing and Monster Truck Tour. This event, one of the last of the season in which drivers can earn points for the Super Modified Mud Racing National Points Championship, is truly a tough one, and the 100-foot-long mud pit here at Oklahoma City's arena is always one of the toughest to figure out. The consistency of the mud makes it exceptionally difficult for the 2,000-horsepower supercharged machines that campaign on it to put down national record lap time. But indeed, the starting field at this event includes U.S. Hot Rod Association 1988 World Champion in the Super Modified ranks Tom Martin in the Mud Patrol, defending event champion Larry Jarrett's Locomotion supercharged Chevy-powered sprint car, and one of the newest and hottest sensations in Super Modified Mud Racing, Tom Mintz out of Illinois with his brand-new supercharged Shake Me 1932 Ford Roadster. In the Monster Truck Wars, we've got an exceptional battle, including two brand-new Jeep-bodied monster machines that will be battling two of the toughest monster tanks ever created. This particular event should be one of the toughest we've ever witnessed, especially down the home stretch in the World Points Championship here in 1989. We'll be back with more competition from Oklahoma City's State Fairgrounds Arena with the U.S. Hot Rod Association Mud Racing and Monster Truck National Championship in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I'm Brett Kepner, and along with Shelley Herman, we are just about ready for the start of competition in the United States Hot Rod Association's Unlimited Mud Bog Competition. The Super Modified will be in action here at this next-to-last championship event for the 1989 season. Very first machine on the starting line is one of the strongest, co-owned by Tom Landrum and Ron Smith. For the state of Michigan, this 1948 Fiat Topolino called Gold Fever, a supercharged, fuel-injected 512 cubic inch big block Chevrolet rat motor, is indeed the power plant that has put this machine in the low 2-second zone in U.S. Hot Rod Association National Event Competition. Smith, concentrating heavily on the starting line, trying to figure out a way to get through this extremely difficult mud bog. The 100-foot-long distance may be nearly impassable, even for a machine with over 2,000 horsepower like this incredible Fiat-bodied entry. Smith inches forward to the staging area and will be the first man through this pit to set the mark here in a very, very important battle for the U.S. Hot Rod Association National Points Championship. Clearing out the mega cubic inch Chevrolet motor, Smith leaves the starting line straight and true and shuts down early, but goes past the disqualification cones at the end of the shutdown. That will put him out on the very first run. A nearly perfect launch off the starting line. The front wheels up when that 2,000 horsepower come into play, but even when Smith gets out of the throttle, he is still coast past the two pairs of cones that mark the disqualification area in the shutdown. Remember, in U.S. Hot Rod Association competition, these machines have to stop as quick as they accelerate. The next machine sitting already on the starting line, though, should be one that could take the lead with a safe run. From Northern Illinois, the incredible 1932 Ford Model A called Shake Me. This is Tom Mintz. A beautiful starting line launch. He shuts it down just before the finish line and stops within 5 feet of the disqualification marker. You can see Mintz is thrilled with that run. Even after a very, very conservative starting line launch, the front end came up beautifully for one of the quickest runs this track probably will see. You'll notice the machine really isn't that dirty, and that's the objective in super modified class racing. The vehicle should skim across the surface of the mud and should end up really not that covered with mud at the end. On the launch, you can see Mintz used a conservative approach. The front end gets buried, but then 1,500 horsepower picks the nose up. He stays in the throttle almost to the finish line, and at 2.44 seconds, he stops just in time in front of those disqualification markers. Mintz's incredible supercharged Chevy-powered Ford-bodied mud racer takes the #1 spot. And that is going to be a tough mark to beat, considering the fact that, as you can see with Tom driving off, this track is already getting very slippery and very sloppy. And that's going to demand a very cautious starting line technique for this next driver, Jerry Smith, and the Jeepster called Overtime. And this machine utilizes, again, Chevrolet motivation. You can see a rather unusual chassis configuration. It's basically stock wheelbase on this machine, really not too much different than a stock-bodied Jeep as far as the height and length of the machine goes. But with nitrous oxide injection in a big block Chevrolet power plant using carburetors, no fuel injection or supercharger in this machine, it should be a much better machine to get a grip on this starting line. The problem with the supercharged entries on this track will be a tendency to overpower that very slippery starting area. Smith already staged, nodding to his fans out there, looking right at the camera, and now ready to lead. He gets a very good starting line launch. And the front end comes up very quickly, but as it drifts to the outer boundary, Jerry is forced to get in and out of the throttle, and that will cost him precious hundredths of a second. He stops well past the finish line, and indeed no problem with staying within those disqualification boundaries. But as the machine took a little bit of a right-hand turn towards the outer berm on this 100-foot-long pit, Smith was forced to get in and out of the throttle, or backpedal, as it is known in the sport, and that cost him some time. Watch the starting line launch. You can see that front end going to that very slippery mud. But it's very, very obvious where he hits the nitrous oxide injection as the nose comes right back up out of that pit. Now it gets sideways. You can see him correct, but as it heads for the outer boundary, indeed, Jerry is forced to get in and out of the throttle. You see the fire out of the pipe, indicating the richened up mixture when he got out of the throttle. 4.09 seconds won't help him, but we've got a tough mark to beat by Tom Mintz. Coming up, more championship mud racing from the USHRA Association. Stay tuned. Fuel-injected, nitrous oxide injected machines that dominate the USHRA Association National Event Tour from coast to coast. This machine should be a handful with only a 98-inch wheelbase. Again, AMC power this time around, but without the use of a supercharger, as Perry Hicks lines up for his shot at 2.44 seconds, the mark to beat from the supercharged Shake Me of Tom Mintz. The green flag comes out, Hicks lines up, and a very, very good starting line launch is ruined with a very, very, very sick-sounding motor. Hicks will stay in the throttle, but there's no use at this point as the machine was gaining no forward momentum. The USHRA Association ground crew will go out and take a measurement, and that will indeed put Hicks in the final standing. A tough break for the local racer who was looking to do good in front of a packed house here at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena. But right now, nowhere near that 2-second mark that he needed to take over the number one spot. You can tell just by looking at the machine that one of the biggest problems with the vehicle as it gets bogged down is the extra weight of the mud. Even though Hicks only went 25 feet 2 inches through this 100-foot-long pit, you can see the mud accumulating on the vehicle, especially when he puts up rooster tails of mud like that, will actually weigh the thing down. In fact, it's not unusual for these guys to pick up anywhere from 300 to 600 extra pounds just from the mud sticking to the mud racer. Hicks stays in the throttle as long as he dares, but with no more forward momentum, he knows that the battle is over and shuts it down. So Tom Mintz still leads the field at 2.44 seconds, but we still have some killers coming up, including defending USHRA Association Super Modified champion Tom Martin in the incredible Mud Patrol. Right now, however, what should prove to be one of the quickest and fastest entries in this battle, the incredible Heart Attack Super Modified Mud Racer of Tim Hall. A fuel-injected, nitrous oxide-injected, alcohol-burning machine that is capable of low 2-second runs. And you'll notice Hall has taken a line a little bit different down this mud pit from some of the other racers, a little bit over to the right-hand side of this mud bog, trying to stay out of the ruts that are forming from previous competitors' tires. Bringing the RPMs up, the flagman throws the green. Hall checks out the surface and runs into a little problem. Now gets back in the throttle, but he was too far over the starting line, and one of the strongest machines in this competition has blown a chance at the number one spot simply by overstaging. You could see Hall trying to find a place to go down through this bit where the ruts weren't too deep, but the machine crept forward over the starting line. At that point, he tried to nail the throttle, but the front end was already buried to the hubs, and Hall had no choice but to watch the machine sink 3 feet into this mud bog. An 18-foot shot will put him dead last in the standings, and one of the toughest possible opponents is sent to the showers without even giving it a decent shot. The next machine fired up and pulling up should also prove to be a serious competitor shooting for the number one spot. Texas's own Bubba Clement. The chances are fiberglass-bodied Jeep funny car with a supercharged, fuel-injected Chevy motor is always one of the quickest and fastest in USHRA Association competition. 2.44 seconds, the mark to beat. Clements brings the idol up, leaves the starting line beautifully, and he's got a great run going. Locking up the brakes, he slides out of bounds, and he knows it. By literally only 5 or 6 feet, he passes the mandatory stopping mark, and indeed will be thrown out even after a successful 2.5-second run that easily could have threatened Tom Meents for the lead. And you can see Clements, he is not happy. Indeed, the stopping area getting so sloppy at this point that it's taking a true braking master just to get these things stopped after a 65-mile-an-hour blast through 100 feet of mud. And Clements knows that he had a shot, but now it doesn't matter. Look at the starting line leave as, again, 2,000 horsepower kicks in. The front end violently comes up out of the pit, but he stays in the throttle a full car length past the finish line marker, and that was the distance that he needed to stop this thing in time for the elapsed time to count. What a break for Bubba Clements. Now, you want a supercharged lightweight mud racer? Take a look at Ken Crum's brand new No Respect. The man who brought us the supercharged Subaru Brat has now built this incredible rear-engine dragster. The power plant, a 354 cubic inch DeSoto Hemi. Only the oldest of old-timers out there will remember the ever-popular DeSoto that produced some of the earliest model Hemi-type engines in the mid-1950s. This 1,600-pound machine is one of the lightest ever created for USHRA Association events, and on this maiden voyage, we'll get a chance to see whether Ken Crum's unique chassis philosophy of this vehicle will work or fail. Bringing the RPM up, he leaves the starting line beautifully and shuts it down as it heads for the outer boundary. I think Crum was more concerned with the fact that he had no steering control with the front end that high in the air, and now shuts it down, again disgusted. It seems that more mud racing competitors at this particular event have been foiled by their inability to judge the track and their car's performance than anything else. You can see Crum stops this machine just inches in front of the finish line, but the Kansas City, Kansas veteran has got to be upset after that shot. He knew he had the perfect starting line launch going, but then when the machine had the front end up that high, there was no way to control it. You can see the car with the front end way up out of the pit. Crum trying to steer it away from the outer boundary, but as the tires just missed going out of bounds to the left side of the berm, he got out of the throttle and shut it down, staring at the finish line marker where he should have been going under full power. A tough break for the youngster from Kansas City, but we've still got some of the best coming, including defending world champion Tom Martin as the shootout in the swamp continues in Oklahoma City. Stay with us.
Brett, you can sure tell which drivers have it and which don't, because as the ruts are forming, the cars are starting to drop out. There's some pretty serious ruts that are in about the middle of the track now, as well as at the beginning, courtesy of Overtime and Mud Special, who sunk just past the starting point.
You're absolutely right, Shelley. The worst thing that can happen to a racer is to get caught up in another driver's tracks. But here's a guy who's smart enough to stay out of it. The defending USHRA Association National Points Champion from Valparaiso, Indiana, Tom Martin, and the incredible Mud Patrol Chevy-powered Ford Coupe. A 540 cubic inch nitrous oxide injected, fuel injected, methanol burning Chevy power plant in this machine has made her one of the quickest in the history of the sport. The first man ever to break 2 seconds flat in the 100-foot long USHRA Association standard length pit. Obviously, Tom Martin would love nothing more than to take the #1 spot from his arch rival Tom Meents, the current leader, at 2.44 seconds. It's interesting to note that Martin has lined the Van Stennis Auto Parts machine up really in an area that has been heavily used by some of the previous starters. Let's see if he can get off this starting line with a minimum of wheel spin. We know that this racer has enough power to keep the front end up and storm it through the top end. The starting line crew now ready to stage Tom Martin up. He adjusts the belts inside the cockpit. Got to remember, this guy is the largest mud racing pilot out there. At an honest 6 foot 6 inches tall, almost 300 pounds. Martin inches forward, lines it up. The all-important groundhog tires will keep an eye on these to see just how bad his starting line spin is. Waiting for the green flag. The 1,600 horsepower nitrous Terra leaves the line beautifully. And Martin with the front end up also heads for the outer boundary on an extremely slippery surface. For the 5th time in this event, a driver is forced to get out of the throttle when the machine heads for the outer boundary that marks each side of this 100-foot long pit. Martin gives a thumbs up to the fans, but knows that he has wasted a shot at the number 1 spot. But look at the elapsed time nonetheless. 2.53 seconds. You can see him out of the throttle and on his 30 feet before the finish line. He stops well within bounds, but without being able to get through this pit under full throttle. Tom Martin, by 0.09 of a second, will fall to the number 2 position. What a heartbreaking effort for the man who won the 1988 U.S. Hot Rod Association World Points Championship. If only he'd been able to stay in the throttle all the way through. Rich Whitfield and his Wildfire, a small block, supercharged Chevrolet Jeep funny car, one of the more unusual entries in this category. As opposed to the mega cubic inch combinations, how about a 350 cubic inch small block? He leaves the starting line beautifully, but the machine heads for the berm again, and he is forced to get out of the throttle. It appears that the ruts that are forming in this track are automatically sending the vehicles over to the right-hand side boundary. That will automatically disqualify them if they went over to the side of the pit. You can see Whitfield exceptionally happy with his ability to keep straight as he throws a wave to the crowd. Watching on the replay, you can see one of the best launches yet. The machine only keeps the front end dug in for a split second. But then when the nose comes up out of the pit from the horsepower, it heads for the outer boundary. He shuts it down just before the finish line. And at 2.98 seconds, Whitfield also had a decent shot at the number 1 spot before he was forced to feather that throttle. A tough break for one of the more unusual competitors in U.S. Hot Rod Association Super Modified Racing. But now it's the defending champion and certainly the hometown favorite here in Oklahoma City, the one and only Larry Jarrett, the Locomotion supercharged super modified mud racer, again relying on mountain motored Chevrolet power. Almost 600 cubic inches of supercharged fuel-injected methanol-burning Chevy in this almost sprint car appearing vehicle. It was 1 year ago that Larry Jarrett set the course record here at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds at 2.06 seconds. If anybody is going to knock Tom Mintz out of the number 1 spot, it's going to be Jarrett. But keep in mind that with the ruts forming almost 3/4 of the way through this 100-foot-long pit, Jarrett is going to have to do some driving. He's got to keep away from the ruts that are sending every other competitor over to the outer side boundary of this track if he expects to stay competitive. Again, remember these cars must use Department of Transportation approved street legal tires, although they can alter the tread in any way, shape, or form they desire. Jarrett, a beautiful launch, but that was something that was not really caused by the racing surface itself, as Jarrett, for some reason, gets out of the throttle halfway down. Could it be that he was so worried about the machine heading for the outer boundary that he shut the throttle down in the anticipation of the machine getting sideways? We'll have to look on the slow motion replay. 2.57 seconds, the front end up. It never appears to head that far over to the side. It looks like Jarrett was more concerned about the sloppy shutdown area and stopping in time before going out of bounds. At 2.57 seconds, it'll only be good enough for the number 3 spot for the defending champion. But don't go away. The battle will continue in Oklahoma City when we return in a moment. We're back to Oklahoma City's Oklahoma State Fairgrounds arena in one of the more trying mud events on the U.S. Hot Rod Association Trail this year, as racers try to figure out one of the strangest mud pits we've had to deal with. A very thick consistency of mud has made controlling these machines almost impossible. But the next driver up is yet another who will try to break through that invisible barrier to threaten the number 1 spot. This is the supercharged Chevy-powered Jeep funny car known as McNasty. Dennis Hansen out of Texas with a supercharged fuel-injected alcohol-burning 2,000 horsepower entry lines it up on a very tricky starting line surface. The McNasty entry at an idle. Stages up. The mark to beat, 2.44 seconds by Tom Mintz and the Shake Me Ford Coupe. Problems off the starting line for Hill. He gets into the throttle on what appeared to be a strong top-end charge, but you could hear the motor bog as soon as he hit the throttle, and that may have cost him a shot at the number 1 spot. Hansen takes the goggles off. He knows that he had problems. Obviously, he is not overly thrilled with his attempt at shooting for the number 1 position. But at 2.85 seconds, he definitely had the top end that he needed to get around the number 1 holder. Leaving the starting line, there you see the front end take a nosedive. That's where the motor bogged. As soon as Hansen got back on the throttle, it was a nearly picture-perfect run. But at 2.85 seconds, not enough to overtake the lead. Shelley Herman is in the pits right now with one of the most influential fathers in mud racing.
do for a living?
My dad works in the office. He's a fireman.
He's a teacher.
Just like Winnie.
And what does your daddy do for a living?
He builds mud balls.
He sure does. His name is Jim Harris, and he is the technical director, and he is a man who knows his mud. Now, Jim, let's say I wanted to have a few close personal friends over, and we wanted to build a mud bog. What would we have to do?
You'd have to go out and dig a hole in the ground, and bring up 350 yards of dirt, lay it out 150 feet long, 30 feet wide, and about 4 feet deep.
Now, I live in Los Angeles, and there's not that much dirt in the whole city. What do you do when you can't find dirt?
Well, we have that problem in New York City, the concrete jungle. Madison Square Garden is in the middle of downtown New York, and we have to bring dirt from about 30 miles out and take it 5 floors up.
Is that a little expensive?
Oh, yeah, it can exceed $45,000 to bring in one track.
Now, is there a difference between the type of track that you could build out of New Jersey dirt versus what you find here in Oklahoma?
Oh, yeah, New Jersey dirt. You find some good hard clay in New Jersey. In Oklahoma City, they have a lot of rodeos, and the dirt happens to be very highly fertilized.
I see. Do the fans ever get involved with any activities in the mud?
Oh, yeah, we do promotions quite often in most of the cities that we go into. Where we bring them down, we do a dash for cash through the mud, and they get in, and it takes a few minutes to pull them out.
Jim, it's obvious that you're a family man. Now, what do you do when you come home from work and you're just covered with mud?
She doesn't let me anywhere near the door. She routes me around back, pulls out the hose, hoses me down, makes sure it's all fit, and lets me in the house.
Incredible man, responsible for building over 90 mud tracks throughout the average U.S. Harbor Association season. Here's Linus Smith with, of all things, a 1951 Willys pickup. The original Jeep leaves the starting line, but boy, with nowhere near enough tire speed it'll take to get through this pit. You can see just how unbelievably slippery that pit is becoming as Linus Smart stays in the throttle until the officials throw the red flag, signifying the end of the run. The Grape Ape fuel-injected Chevy-powered Willys will not be a serious contender for this battle, but Linus Smith is starting to get a feel of just how tough this mud pit is here at the Oklahoma City State Arena. He's still thrilled. Looking at the replay, you can see that Linus left the starting line with almost a dead idle, and indeed that was nowhere near as much power as he needed to get through this pit. About 40 feet down track, the machine finally digs in, and throwing rooster tails of mud up the four-wheel drive, the Grape Ape slowly sinks into the mud pit here at the State Fairgrounds Arena. Not nearly good enough for the number 1 spot, but we've still got an awful lot of machines trying to overtake Tom Benson, the Shake Me Ford, ready for competition. With rooster tails sailing into the air, Linus Smart sees his last inch of forward movement, and the red flag comes up. That's the name of the game in U.S. Harbor Association Championship Mud Racing. You always stay in the throttle until the machine just can't go any further, and the measurement is taken from there. Yet another one of the supercharged entries, Jim Tollison in the Sandpacker, a fuel-injected, supercharged, methanol-burning, Chevy-powered lightweight roadster that indeed has always been one of the toughest in the Southwest Conference of U.S. Harbor Association National Event Competition. It won his first national event appearances of the year. Tollison leaves the starting line very nicely, but apparently shuts it down before the finish line as he, too, was more concerned with stopping this machine. At the very, very slippery shutdown area, Tollison knew that he had to get on the throttle, stay on it as long as he dared, and then shut it down in hopes of staying within the shutdown boundaries. But Tollison will not be a threat, shutting off 3/4 of the way down the track. And right now, it looks like Tom Benson, the Shake Me machine, is exhibiting more guts than anything else in holding that number 1 position. At 3.22 seconds, you can see Tollison stay in the throttle after a very, very nice starting line launch. The front end comes up out of the pit, but he shuts it down about 25 feet before the finish line marker, and that will only be good enough for one of the top 6 positions at this point. Tollison, on his way to a 2-second run, just couldn't stay in the throttle any longer. As Tollison drives it up and out of the pit, he too is now well aware that a 2.44-second run through this pit is mighty impressive. We've still got more championship mud racing action coming up, though, shooting for that number 1 spot when we return to Oklahoma City in just a moment. We continue with U.S. Hot Rod Association Championship Super Modified Mud Racing action in Oklahoma City with Jackie Hunter and the Spare Parts Jeep, an amazing vehicle that has always proven to be very competitive year in and year out here at the Oklahoma City Championship. It's a stock wheelbase, stock appearing Jeep CJ7 Renegade with real live AMC Jeep power. Only 340 cubic inches worth with one 4-barrel carburetor. An amazing piece of equipment with some of the largest tires in super modified racing still remaining under that 44-inch tall limit. And by the way, these tires are still stock configuration as they would be run on the street. The Spare Parts entry leaves the starting line very, very nicely. And with Jeep power, even though he gets out of the throttle just before the finish line, this ride has just beaten some of the supercharged lightweight entries here at Oklahoma City. A great, great run for the Spare Parts AMC-powered Renegade. In fact, it'll be real interesting to see where this elapsed time places him in the final field. Look at the starting line launch. Nearly perfect, even though the machine noses under it in the first 10 feet. He brings it right back up, and at 3.27 seconds, that'll be good for one of the top 6 positions with a virtually stock Jeep Renegade. A tremendous run for a competitor that normally would have been overshadowed by the 2,000 horsepower supercharged entries, and a look of determination indicates I think he knew that he was capable of doing it. What a ride. But I'll tell you what, this vehicle happens to be, at this point, one of the quickest full-body trucks in U.S. Hot Rod Association history. From Michigan, this is Jeff Starkin and the Ground Zero Chevy S10, a supercharged, fuel-injected, methanol-burning small-block Chevy entry. The Zeeland Motor Supply truck recently ran as quick as 2.33 seconds and is certainly a contender for the #1 spot here at Oklahoma City. One of the highest RPM trucks in the sport, sometimes reaching 11,000 RPM at the finish line. Starkin lines it up. He staged, clears out the mighty small block, and waits for the starter's signal to leave the starting line. And obviously, it's going to take a technique. A nice starting line launch. Starkin stays with it all the way through, and by about 3 feet, goes out of bounds. That has been the trickiest part of this event. Getting in the throttle, staying in it, and then trying to stop. You can see the cone just in the center of the driver's cab. The crowd goes crazy with one of the quickest runs of the event. But unfortunately, it will not count as Starkin goes out of bounds. The elapsed time on the run, 2.52 seconds. Would have been good enough for the #2 spot. Look at the replay of a nearly picture-perfect run. The front end in the air, the incredible horsepower of that small block taking him well past the finish line under power. But with all 4 tires locked up, Starkin still could not keep the machine within that 100-foot shutdown area boundary. So the final class results for the Super Modified division will find Tom Mintz, the Illinois rookie, in the #1 spot with the supercharged Shake Me 1932 Ford Roadster at 2.44 seconds, 9/100ths of a second ahead of the #1 man in the world from 1988, Tom Martin in the Mud Patrol 32 Ford at 2.53 seconds. Defending Oklahoma City champion Larry Jarrett's Locomotion supercharged Chevy Sprint car at 2.57 seconds, and the twin Texas entries of McNasty and Wildfire in the high 2-second zone round out the top 5. Shelley Herman is in the pits with the man who just beat the defending world champion and picked up some really valuable points in the world championship battle.
With me now is Tom Mintz, who won this evening's competition with a time of 2.44 seconds driving Shake Me. You had quite a wild ride tonight, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was just fortunate enough. I made a decent pass and got stopped in time.
Yeah, I understand stopping was pretty critical tonight. Disqualified quite a few of the drivers.
Yeah, the pit was awful slick at the end. Making a good run was one thing, but getting stopped in time was another.
You have a couple sponsors you wanted to thank, didn't you?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Sam Beck, 4x4 Performance and Rand Tool, and Jennings Auto Body for painting the car.
And we'd like to thank you for a real good show tonight.
All right, thanks a lot.
Well, that win will put Tom Mintz in a true dogfight for the World Championship points lead with Tom Martin. And Martin is standing by in the pits watching a monitor of his run to tell us exactly what happened.
Okay, we got our launched off, going pretty straight. And right there, we hit high gear, and then nitrous comes in. The wheel cut right a little bit. I was heading for out of bounds, and I let out a little too soon. Then we hit the brakes, and that was all we could do.
A little too soon computes to 8/100th of a second too soon. For the Monster Truck fans, we'll be right back with high flying action from Oklahoma City. Stay with us. And now up and over 6 cars on the floor of the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena across the finish line, and he'll receive the first elapsed time of this special round-robin program. As the first man to hit those cars, Baintner picks up a lot of air. 14.92 seconds, but a beautiful landing will give him now the elapsed time mark to beat against his rather unusual opponent. Also from the state of Washington, Jeff Baintner will be taking on one of the very few lady monster truck drivers in U.S. Hobbit Association competition. This is Debbie Roden, driving Baintner's old hot stuff Jeep. And despite the fact that this beautiful young lady has only been in competition for just a few months, she has already proven herself to be one of the most aggressive drivers on the U.S. Hobbit Association National Event Trail. She takes the green and obviously full throttles it down to that first left-hand turn up the slight incline, now making a very tight hard left, trying to keep the vehicle straight. She hits the 6 cars on the floor. Tremendous airborne leap for Debbie Roden as she takes it across the finish line with an elapsed time that certainly will rival that of Jeff Baintner. The lady hits the cars on the final straight. Lots of air underneath this 14,000-pounder, but at 16.47 seconds, she'll be about a second and a half behind Jeff Baintner's qualifying run. Shelley Herman had a chance to talk to these two incredible teammates just before the start of the first round of eliminations here tonight.
The monster truck competition this evening has a little extra twist to it. Not only do we have 2 real fierce competitors, we have 2 people who date each other when they're not racing against each other. First off, I want to talk to Jeff Baintner. You own both the trucks, don't you?
Yes, that's right.
And I understand that you own them free and clear, which is something not a lot of the drivers do here.
Well, pretty much, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. How long have you been racing?
We've been racing hot stuff for 2 years, and we just introduced our newest one, which is called High Voltage. It's just been out a couple of weeks.
And what's special about High Voltage?
It's lighter, faster. It's just up to date with everything else that's out there, maybe hopefully a little bit ahead in a few areas.
And do you think that that's enough trucks to beat Debbie? You saw her earlier in the show, Debbie Roden?
Yes, hi, how are you?
I'm just fine. Now, I understand that, you know, people who work together as well as date each other, there can be some kind of, you know, competition that way, too. What do you guys do when you're, like, working here together and racing here? How does that work out?
We work as a team, but we're still opponents. You know, outside the arena where we have our personal relationship, the minute we come in here and the stage is set, lights are on, we're, you know, opponents again. So it works good, though. We get along great.
Now, basically, you are racing for the same team, but there's got to be, like, some little extra incentive. Do you guys have any little private bets you do between yourselves?
Not really. Maybe a dinner or two once in a while, you know, if he beats me or, you know, if he does better than I did, clears the cars, you know, something like that.
Have you ever had to buy dinner?
Last night was the first time I've been beat, and I probably owe her a dinner.
Well, listen, it's going to be a good competition tonight, and just to show that there's no love lost between you, why don't you guys just shake hands, and we'll get this thing going, okay? Come on, you guys. Come on, shake, okay? May the best driver win.
We'll see just who is the best driver. Now in the second round for the 4-wheeled monster trucks. Remember, the winner of this battle will take on the winner of the Monster Tank Championship run. Here's Baintner one more time in the hot stuff machine. Remember, we saw him running in the mid-14 seconds out as he elicits a little cheer from the crowd for the supercharged Chevrolet-powered 14,000-pound High Voltage. Staged and ready. The flagman checks with the driver and now prepares to drop the green in front of event director Jim Harris. Baintner another full power launch, now making that hard inclined left turn. Beautiful. Absolutely perfectly straight to hit the cars. Huge airborne jump, landing on car number 6 and bouncing across the finish line for what may be his quickest run yet. Once again, Baintner certainly taking no time over those cars, and the elapsed time drops a full second. 13.59 seconds for the brand new 89 Jeep Renegade, and that will certainly put the pressure on Baintner's teammate. Debbie Roden now knows she's going to have to come up with one incredible run if she expects to get in that final round against the winner of the Monster Tank Championship. The lady lines up the Jeep on the starting line. It is imperative that she makes that tricky left-hand inclined turn onto the second half straight as quickly as Baintner did on his run. Lining up. Checking both front and rear wheel steering. The green flag drops. The lady nails it and now prepares for that tricky left-hand turn. Cranking the wheel hard and hanging on. She gets it just about perfect as well. A little bit of correction necessary. She tries to keep it straight, heading for the cars, and loses a lot of forward speed. And that is going to keep Debbie Roden from knocking Jeff Bainer out. 16.03 seconds for the lady, and Jeff Bainer will go to the final round against the winner of the Monster Tank Championship. A beautiful sight was Debbie Roden's incredible G-Star airborne and taking a bouncing, rough landing. Watch those tires compress and send the rear end up in the air again as the lady coasts across the finish line. But I'll tell you what, it's going to take an incredible run by one of our tank competitors to knock that brand new Jeep out of the program. When we return, it'll be armored combat with the incredible tank monsters. Stay with us. Here at the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena in Oklahoma City, we are ready to determine a finalist for the Monster Truck Championship panel in the Monster Tank Division. And this is the machine that started it all with this new breed of vehicle, the original Virginia Beach Beast Chevrolet, with Mike Katz behind the wheel of the rear-engine supercharged Chevrolet-powered machine. The first ever to incorporate monster truck principles with the incredible and undeniable power of an Army M4 tank chassis. Lining up in the starting line and perusing the same course that we saw our four-wheelers take, Katz leaves the starting line with the non-suspended machine and now has to make that hard left inclined turn, spinning around just a little bit on what appears to be a rather tricky turn for these ultra-heavyweight machines. Now heading for the cars, airborne for Katz in the tank, and a rough landing for the Virginia driver as he lands and takes it across the finish line. Watch the tank treads distort on a machine that has no suspension when it lands. A rough landing for a driver of any type in the cockpit of this ride. You can see the tank treads distorting, but then applying full power across the finish line. The mark to beat, 18.05 seconds now for this awesome vehicle. One of the most innovative and certainly strongest performing new monsters on the U.S. Harvard Association National Event Trail, and Shelley Herman talked with the driver.
You're looking at the latest creation from the mind and body shop of Bob Chandler. This is Bigfoot Fast Track, and joining me now is one of the newer drivers to the circuit, Dan Dubbs. Dan, do you have any strategy for this evening that you want to share with us?
Well, we'll try to stay low and get around the corner down here at the slippery part of the track.
This little slippery how well, we'll be watching for you.
Dan Dubbs leads the starting line with the twin supercharged Ford engine lowrider van of Bob Chandler. The Bigfoot Fast Track machine makes that tricky incline turn. Dubbs now nails the throttle. The full suspension allows him to keep it close to the ground. On a beautiful landing, Dubbs looks like a winner. The last time, 14.87 seconds. Look at Dubbs hit this set of cars using a full suspension on this armored personnel carrier chassis. The vehicle lands smooth as glass, and Dubbs is able to apply full throttle almost immediately upon landing, almost 3.5 seconds quicker than Mike Katz. But now the second round of competition will determine the true overall win, and the Virginia Beach Beast is ready to take on the challenge of the new lowrider Ford. Katz leaves the starting line very nicely. Now locks up the left set of treads, puts power to the right, makes that hard U-turn, and gets ready for the hit on the cars. Tremendous air for a monster machine, almost nosing it over, but Mike Katz definitely put down one of his best runs ever. The elapsed time, 14.39 seconds, will take the lead for the Chevy fans, pulling for the Virginia Beach Beast. Watch this hit. And look at the incredible distortion on the drive treads as this thing sails through the air. What a landing! Throwing Katz around in the cockpit, 22,000 pounds of Chevy coming back to earth. A wild ride, and now that will put the pressure on Dan Dubbs, the past U.S. Harvard Association National Truck Pulling Champion, who now doubles as the driver of Bob Chandler's Bigfoot Fast Track van. Not one, but two supercharged Ford engines side by side. The very first tank-type monster ever to use a full suspension, and Dubbs has problems. You could see sparks as the machine went off the dirt and onto the concrete here at the State Fairgrounds Arena. Dubbs gets right back on the throttle after literally driving into the berm of the mud pit. Straightening this thing out as best he can, but there's no way he's going to better the mid-14-second last time by Mike Katz, spinning it out at the finish line and almost putting it into the wall. Let's see where Dubes ran into problems. Apparently, it was just too much power on a rather slippery starting line surface as Dubes just starts to drift to the right and locks up the brakes before hitting the berm of the mud pit. Luckily for Dubes, he didn't end up in that 48-inch deep mud bog. But indeed, it took some driving just to get this thing back straightened around. 23.61 seconds won't help Dan Dubes a bit. And for one of the first times since its debut, this incredible high-flying suspended tank will not be in a championship final round. That will pit the Virginia Beach Beast of Mike Katz in the incredible original tankster against Jeff Baintner's wild new 1981 Jeep for the final round of this championship. Baintner right down the starting line, lining up. He knows he's going to have to come up with another mid-14-second elapsed time if he's going to win the overall title. It's interesting to note that this may be one of the most evenly matched monster truck versus monster tank battles we've seen yet, if only because the new Jeep utilizes a very short wheelbase which enhances its cornering abilities, and everybody knows that the tank-driven machines can turn on a dime. Baintner waiting patiently on the starting line. Now gets the green light, another full throttle launch. He's got to make that uphill, hard left turn nearly perfectly, and indeed doesn't even have to correct. He nails the throttle and clears the 6 cars on the floor of the arena, landing almost at the finish line. The crowd loves every minute of it as Baintner salutes the fans here at Oklahoma City. That was a nearly picture-perfect monster truck run. On the replay, watch the nearly perfect launch off these cars. Hitting them, heading straight for the air, and clearing all 6 vehicles on the floor. The elapsed time, an incredible 12.18 seconds, with Baintner literally bouncing over the finish line. Simply incredible, picking up almost 2 seconds from his previous best. And now Mike Katz in the Virginia Beach Beast knows he's got to come up with the ride of his life in order to beat the 89 Jeep from Washington. East meets west in the center of the United States. Katz ready for the final dash. Leaves the starting line a little sluggishly, but he's going to have to make up the time on this turn. A nearly perfect turn, and now Katz heads for the cars. Airborne again for the 20,000-pound tank, and across the finish line, we'll have to wait for the elapsed time reading. It's going to be that close, and the crowd obviously thinks that the tank Chevrolet has a serious chance at beating the Jeep. But wait a minute, Katz is doing a reverse wheel stand over the cars and has it sideways and on its side. Unbelievable. Katz goes out for some showmanship and ends up putting the Virginia Beach Beast on its side. The safety crews and track officials already at the vehicle. In fact, you can even see Debbie Roden and Jeff Bader heading out there to make sure Katz is okay. But some quick camera work shows us that inside the vehicle, Mike Katz is A-OK. The crowd gives him a standing ovation, and rightfully so. After a little bit of showmanship, Mike Katz definitely went for the ride of his life on this final run, but a little bit wilder than I think even he had originally planned. Obviously, the safety equipment required by the United States Harvard Association in these machines held up beautifully. The elapsed time, 14.42 seconds, was not good enough to take the #1 spot. Jeff Baintner has taken the overall championship, but definitely lost out in showmanship after that incredible flip. Here we see Katz going over as he landed with the left side tracks off the cars, and with 20,000 pounds of weight, these things will throw it around quickly, and that's what sent the machine on the driver's side, right on the floor in front of the fans. We understand from this floor that the body damage on the machine is not that bad, so Katz survives this without receiving any personal injury and really not too much injury to the original monster tank. You can see him surveying the damage down there on the floor, but what a way to end the monster truck program. We'll be back from Oklahoma City with our final comments in just a moment.
Got Mike Katz here. He's the driver of Virginia Beach, and we saw what happened. Now you tell us in your own words. What happened?
Well, I was a little bit too far over to the side when I came across the cars going backwards, and I couldn't pull it back over. I tried to power brake on one side and power it out, but it was too far gone at that time.
How you doing?
I'm fine.
You're shaking like a leaf.
It's my second time. It's a little bit easier the second time.
Well, let's not make it a third, okay? I know you're real concerned about your tank. Get back to it because I know some oil's leaking,
Thank you.
okay?
Well, Mike Katz doesn't seem to be that dejected about the situation. And Oklahoma City's Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Arena seems to be a jinx for the Virginia Beach driver. 1 year ago at this event, he landed so hard from a jump that he blew the windshield and front end off this machine. Now he comes back a year later and puts her on its side. Pulling 20,000 pounds of monster tank back over isn't a very easy proposition either. With event director Jim Harris at the controls, we use some heavy equipment to create one loud slam as this machine comes back over on the track. Almost overlooked was our winner, Jeff Bainter.
Coming in tonight with the fastest time is Jeff Bainter at 12.16 seconds in high voltage. No surprise to me. How'd you feel?
Real good. The vehicle's working really good. Every weekend we make a few adjustments, and it's just working better and better. I'm real happy with it.
You got up in the air tonight, didn't you?
Yeah, we try. That's what the fans say to see, and we try and give them what they want.
And it looks like Debbie's going to have to buy you supper tonight, huh?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
You couldn't ask for a wilder finale to any monster truck show. A brand new short wheelbase monster machine taking the win with one of the original monster tanks going upside down. His tire compressing landing on low ET of this event in the low 12-second zone for Jeff Bainter gave him the championship at the new high-voltage Jeep, while Tom Mintz, the rookie driver from Illinois, with the shaky, supercharged 1932 Ford Model Coupe, indeed took a deserved win in the super-modified mud ranks, using his head to figure out one of the trickiest mud pits we've seen this year. We've got more UF Hot Rod Association action coming your way, especially in this dogfight for the Super Modified World Points Championship. On behalf of myself, Brett Kepner, and Shelley Herman, we'll see you soon at the next UF Hot Rod Association Monster Truck and Mud Racing Spectacular. Thanks for being with us.